Over the past years, unprecedented efforts have been made to beat the Russian state out of Vladimir Putin's hands. What literally worked without fail in other countries, where it was necessary to discredit a politician undesirable to Western elites, did not work in Russia, despite the enormous efforts of both Western and Russian stakeholders. As we know, Vladimir Vladimirovich turned out to be a big thorn in all parts of the body of the Western elite, and they were ready to spend huge resources to ease their itch. And as in any other country in Russia, there are those who are interested in promoting the Western narrative for Western donations. To overthrow the government of Russia, the whole arsenal of means aimed at discrediting both Putin and his entourage was used. And they hit on all fronts, starting with the money issue. Putin is a corrupt thief and the richest man in the world with stolen capital of hundreds of billions of dollars, and ending with the fact that Putin is long gone, and Russia is ruled by his doppelgangers. Here, for example, is a picture from the internet, Putin's doppelgangers, or this one, Putin's reincarnation. Judging by the Times revelation, Vladimir Putin was the object of deep U.S. intelligence interest even then, dating back to the early 1990s. And they collected everything, including financial assets. But in more than 20 years of active surveillance, the world's most powerful intelligence organization, they say, has never managed to find Putin's billions. However, this in no way prevented them from building an image of Putin as a thief, dictator, corrupter, and Russia's biggest pest. Well, 20 years of no results. And for the most part, especially in the ranks of the youth, it was already kind of easy to associate any government activity as purely malicious. Internet resources, memes, and demotivators were launched to anger the public as much as possible, for example, with the incomes of Russian top managers put by Putin at the head of state-owned companies. Here's an example of such a site. But what is it about Putin that displeases the Western elite so much? As corny as it sounds, he did not let Western corporations loot Russia. And the beginning of Putin's vilification can be clearly traced back to 2007, when the repeal of the latest production sharing agreements, which previously allowed Western companies not only to extract all kinds of resources from Russia, taking 91% of all extracted resources and leaving 9% in Russia, but also, most importantly, to put the Russian field on their balance sheet as if it were their private property. And so, after this very treaty was violated, under which Russia refused to pay the colonial tax for its existence, the West made every effort to change the power in Russia. They started hitting the very top of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, FSB, FTS, Arbitration Court, General Prosecutor's Office, FSTN. The first to be openly and publicly sanctioned by Western countries, especially the United States and the European Union. The so-called Magnitsky List, which provides for sanctions against persons suspected by the U.S. side of human rights violations in Russia. And Putin himself has been demonized as much as possible. Then, using the global financial crisis and the subsequent recovery of the Russian economy, the organization of many opposition organizations began. In the movement, the dawning of opposition personalities and their sponsorship by Western structures. What the Western curators can do is wage an information war, which they most often win easily. And color revolutions all over the world is clear proof of that. Here's an infographic of color revolutions from 2000 to 2017. The maximum activity among mass rallies against Putin took place from 2011 to 2013. It was then that international judicial bodies upheld the so-called will of the people. Thus, the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, supported the opposition leaders to the maximum extent possible, awarding them compensation in the amount of tens of thousands of euros, which according to international law must be paid by Russia for the inconvenience caused to them. And the Russian treasury has been paying faithfully, thereby transforming the opposition in the minds of the younger generation, who later decided that they too would be paid for their human rights activism, especially when their leader promised them guarantees. Here, the school children demanded 10,000 euros from Navalny, but it didn't. Of course, no one cared about ordinary people, much less wasted time and resources on an active mass of protesters. The main bet was on the leaders of the opposition. That's where all the incentives went. Few people know, but one of the reasons for Russia's withdrawal from international treaties of the Council of Europe was precisely the fact of deliberate collusion to discredit the Russian government with these very treaties, rather than the protection of the rights of the country, including human rights in Russia. Now, any conventions of European treaties, including those of the ECHR, are no longer legally binding on Russia. Colossal resources, including Western media platforms, were allocated to the media promotion of opposition figures, even in spite of clear violations of the rules of the online community platform and the content they published. As a prime example, secret corporate details were withheld following the purchase of Twitter, which is banned in Russia by Elon Musk. Where the most well-known and established fact is how the leadership of Twitter, which is banned in Russia, has repeatedly publicly stated that it is making efforts to identify and crack down on state-sponsored propaganda campaigns. But the US government had nothing to do with it. Twitter, which is banned in Russia, whitelists dozens of Pentagon accounts, allowing their owners to repeatedly violate the social network's rules. This is how public opinion was formed in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, Russia, and other countries. There's a whole investigation into how Twitter, which is banned in Russia, helped the Pentagon in its covert online propaganda campaign around the world. The same goes for other social networks, especially this video hosting site, when a video about Putin's palace was recommended, even to children. Then there's the spectacle of poisoning a patient and touring countries in Europe. Then an Oscar for the movie he starred in. It was a purely political spectacle for the benefit of demonizing Putin and his entourage, where violent, corrupt officials holed up in London and supported numerous anti-Russian power foundations with media and material support. As an example, asking for Putin's leniency. Khodorkovsky promised not to get involved in politics and immediately broke his promise after leaving the country. However, despite their best efforts in the helicopter, China could not win. Power in Russia has held firm, and the president's personality has begun to gain popularity and approval. Not so long ago, the position for Putin in some collectives caused laughter and bewilderment, and today the position for the opposition causes, to put it mildly, a desire to pity the alternatively gifted. Such a paradigm shift was in no way predicted in the West, and they went full wobbin' then. Maximum discrediting of Putin in the international arena has begun. Then Western heads of state openly began to insult Putin. And on March 17, 1923, the International Criminal Court (ICC) issued a warrant for his arrest, the sitting president with the strongest nuclear arsenal in the world. According to the international obligation, once a warrant is issued for Putin, he must be arrested and handed over to the ICC in any of the 123 countries that have ratified Rome. That's the one in red. Well, and it wasn't enough. And in Europe, they've gone even further. Banned Russians from voting for Putin in the next election. In addition, called on the whole world to follow their example. Thus, on October 13, 2023, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe unanimously adopted a resolution not to recognize Vladimir Putin's legitimacy as president after the 2024 elections, halting all contacts with the Russian side, except humanitarian, and in order to achieve peace. Here's the highlighted. Unanimously approved the draft resolution based on a report prepared by Peter Omstinct of the Netherlands. The committee recalled the conclusions of the Council of Europe's Venice Commission that the refusal to limit the term limit of the incumbent president violates both the Russian constitution and the principles of international law. And here's the headline. Passé calls on the international community to no longer recognize Putin's legitimacy as president after 2024. He added that the adopted resolution is in the interests of the people of Russia first of all, but also of Europe and the whole world. After that, the Russian Foreign Ministry refused to invite OSCE observers to the presidential election, citing political bias and inadequate requirements of the organization as reasons. Coming out. This is the Russia of the future, for which the crowds on Bolotnaya Square danced, where the constitution will be adopted for us by Western countries, as well as the president. And we should just relax and enjoy it. As a result, voting for the president of Russia has acquired new colors and meanings. Now we will not only elect a president, but we will finally decide on the new world order for the next 50 years. And whether or not we'll be pressed to the tune of Western countries.